For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the sky and dreamed. We imagined flying faster, higher, and farther than anyone had ever gone before. But for most of history, that's all it was, a dream. Then, in the mid-20th century, the world plunged into its most destructive conflict, and that dream stopped being an imagination and became a brutal necessity. World War II didn't just redraw borders and topple empires. It tore open the sky itself. It shattered the known limits of flight and laid the groundwork for a new age, an age where speed would surpass sound. Rockets would pierce the atmosphere, and warfare would point humanity toward space for the very first time. At the start of the war, aviation was still bound by propellers, piston engines, and imperfect aerodynamics. Planes were fast, but they were predictable. Air combat followed rules that had barely changed since the First World War. But as the conflict escalated, a stark reality emerged. Victory wouldn't go to the side with the most planes, but to the one that could break the laws of physics. The real race was no longer just for air superiority. It was for speed, altitude, and range beyond anything the world had ever seen. Driven by the sheer urgency of survival and backed by unmatched industrial power, the United States threw itself into this technological revolution. Engineers began experimenting with radical aircraft designs, new fuels, advanced alloys, and most importantly, entirely new forms of propulsion. The goal was both simple and seemingly impossible: to build aircraft that could fly faster than anything ever created before. This was the moment when the jet engine emerged from theory into a revolutionary promise. Unlike a piston engine, which uses propellers to slice through the air, jet propulsion works on a completely different principle. Air is sucked in, compressed, ignited with fuel, and then expelled violently backward. This continuous, relentless force pushes the aircraft forward with incredible acceleration, allowing it to reach speeds that were once pure science fiction. While Germany was the first to field operational jet fighters, it was the United States that would take this raw, untamed technology and transform it into something reliable, scalable, and ultimately dominant in the years that followed. The early days of American jets were terrifying. These first machines were unstable, dangerous, and unforgiving. Pilots climbed into experimental cockpits knowing their aircraft might shake violently, overheat without warning, or even fail catastrophically. Every single test flight was an act of raw courage. But with each successful mission, each piece of data collected, humanity was pushed closer to a future where the sky was no longer a ceiling, but a highway. While jets were busy redefining flight within the atmosphere, an even more radical transformation was happening in parallel, almost in secret: the rise of rocket technology. Unlike aircraft, rockets had a game-changing advantage. They didn't need air to function. They carried their own fuel and oxidizer, which meant they could generate thrust and accelerate even in the vacuum where the atmosphere ends. This single difference changed everything. Rockets weren't just faster weapons. They were machines capable of reaching beyond Earth itself. During the war, rockets first appeared as weapons of terror. The German V-2 became the world's first ballistic missile. It would climb to the very edge of space before crashing down onto its targets at impossible speeds. There was no defense, no warning, no way to intercept it. For the first time in history, war arrived from the sky without wings or pilots, fundamentally reshaping the psychological nature of conflict. When the war finally ended, American military planners immediately recognized what these rockets truly represented. They weren't just weapons anymore. They were keys to intercontinental missiles, to surveillance satellites, and eventually to the exploration of space itself. In a race to secure this future, German scientists, their research data, and their rocket designs were absorbed into American research programs. The technological sprint that began during the war now expanded into a global marathon with much higher stakes. At the same time, aerodynamics was undergoing its own rapid evolution. The straight wings of older planes gave way to swept-back wings, a design that drastically reduced drag at high speeds. Pressurized cockpits allowed pilots to fly at altitudes where the air was too thin to breathe. Instruments became more precise. New alloys were developed to resist extreme heat, and aircraft structures became stronger, yet lighter. All these innovations were converging on one single, unavoidable challenge: breaking the sound barrier. For decades, the speed of sound Mach 1 was believed to be a physical wall. Aircraft approaching it would experience violent turbulence, a complete loss of control, and catastrophic structural failure. Many of the world's best engineers believed that surpassing it was simply impossible. But World War II had already proven a fundamental truth: limits only exist until survival demands they be broken. And so, in 1947, just 2 years after the war ended, test pilot Chuck Yeager shattered the sound barrier. The resulting sonic boom was more than just a loud noise. It was the thunderous announcement of a new era. These incredible advancements didn't happen in a vacuum. They were supported by parallel revolutions in navigation, radio communication, flight controls, and even early computing. Primitive computers began the painstaking work of calculating missile trajectories and aerodynamic data, allowing engineers to push designs far beyond what human intuition alone could achieve. Aviation was no longer just about combat. It had become a true scientific frontier. And then came the most profound realization of all. If rockets could reach the edge of space, then space itself was no longer unreachable. It became a new domain: strategic, scientific, and symbolic. The cold, hard logic of warfare, when applied to technology, had accidentally pushed humanity beyond its own planet. What began as a race to win battles on Earth became the foundation for satellites, for space exploration, and eventually, for sending humans into the cosmos. In the years after the war, these military technologies rapidly transformed civilian life. Jet aircraft shrank the globe, turning grueling days of travel into mere hours. Rockets enabled global communication, weather forecasting, and a new era of space science. The same equations that once guided missiles would later guide probes to the far-flung edges of our solar system. But this incredible legacy carries a haunting paradox. The space age was born from fear. Humanity's greatest technological leap was driven by the terrifying possibility of annihilation. Every scientific breakthrough carried the dark shadow of militarization. Every single step we took toward the stars was accompanied by the chilling knowledge that the very same technology could be used to erase entire cities from the map. Yet, the transformation could not be undone. World War II permanently and irrevocably altered our relationship with the sky. Airspace became a strategic domain. Space became the ultimate high ground. And the technology, once unleashed, could never be put back in its box. In the end, jets and rockets were not merely tools of war. They were pivotal turning points in the story of humanity. They proved that limits, even those we believe are absolute, exist only until they are challenged. And they showed that when humanity is pushed to the very edge, it is capable of innovation as breathtaking as it is dangerous. The war ended in 1945, but the world it launched into the sky is still moving, still accelerating. Every supersonic aircraft, every satellite in orbit, every rocket that pierces the atmosphere carries the complex legacy of that conflict. Because it was there, in the smoke and fire and urgency of war, that humanity took its first real, definitive step toward the stars. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey through history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the technology that shapes our world. See you next time.